Think Lamborghinis are scary? Think again. Welcome to the new 907 brake horsepower Temerario.
This is really fun. And do you know what? I suspected it might be.
Because this is a trajectory that Lamborghini seems to have been on for a while. It was obvious with the Technica, the Temerario's immediate predecessor, more playful and biddable than any Huracan before. Then the big Revuelto proved it wasn't a one-off, with a sort of ease of handling that was really anathema to its V12 forebears. And now there's this. So as well as driving the new Temerario, I'm going to go on the hunt for the person who I think might be responsible for this, or at least have some of the answers. If this film enrages your bull and makes you think about swapping your Lada for a Lamborghini, then why not head over to HagertyMarketplace.com. You can auction for free and keep 100% of the sale price. To find out more, just click on the playful little link in the whimsical description down below. Today we're at Estoril in Portugal. And it's a circuit that I really love because there's a proper sort of old school feel to it. The last time I was here was for the McLaren 750S launch, and there's an interesting connection between McLaren, Lamborghini and this place. In 1993, the day after the Portuguese Formula 1 Grand Prix, Ayrton Senna drove a gorgeous Stormtrooper spec McLaren test car here. And instead of his race car's Ford V8, this McLaren MP48B had a 3.5 litre naturally aspirated V12 with pneumatic valves, and it was built by Lamborghini. And it was quick, really quick. They verified it with another test at Silverstone, but in the end McLaren went with V10 from Peugeot for commercial reasons. Senna left the team next year and Lamborghini left Formula 1 for good. What might have been. Right, enough history, because today there is a whole rainbow of cars running around Estoril, and the Temerario's engine is also a major talking point.
Of course, we bemoan the loss of the old V10, the glorious V10, but we know why that is. And at least, on paper, we've got something quite interesting to replace it. What is it? It's a 4 litre twin turbocharged, so hot V, V8. But, as you can probably hear, the crucial bit is that it revs to 10,000 RPM.
The whole hybrid powertrain, including the front electric motors, is capable of producing a maximum of 907 brake horsepower, but the V8 alone makes 789 bhp and 538 pounds-feet of torque.
And that power, despite this being a turbocharged engine, that power does come right up high, right up in the 9s. So here we are, 9, 10.
But what I want to know is, how do you build a turbocharged engine, and a relatively large 4 litre one at that revs so crazily high? One of the original thoughts for this car was to actually use the turbocharged V8 that you'll find in the Urus and various Porsche products as well, but Davide Bizzarri, formerly of Ferrari, he did the P1 powertrain from McLaren as well. He went to the board and said, no, I've got a much better idea. I've got this turbocharged V8 in mind that's going to rev to 10,000 RPM. They looked slightly aghast, but he managed to convince them, and they said, well, off you go and develop it. And this is it. It's designated L411, and the point of it is basically to try to have the best of all worlds. It is over square with a bore of 90mm and a stroke of 78.5, and high revs mean big IHI turbos. So big, in fact, that they have to sit on top of rather than in the V. They run a maximum of 2.5 bar of boost and have electric wastegates, but to avoid a response black hole at low revs, the addition of a 110 kilowatt axial flux electric motor integrated into the engine was absolutely crucial. There are also titanium conrods and myriad other parts to help it rev so high. Beautiful little things like this finger follower here, which allows it to rev so high with its DLC diamond-like coating on it, which gives it that sort of dark shade. Other things in there, well,
obviously flat plane crank, that set up second order vibrations, so they needed a different alloy, and actually they went to Ducati and the MotoGP team and asked, can we use the alloy that you use, which is 357 copper, so that's in here as well. Also there's 3D printing inside for the water jackets. It's just a fabulously complicated engine.
But while complication is interesting, a Lamborghini engine should also be emotive, make your spine tingle. So what does this new turbocharged V8 feel like?
It feels kind of like a motorbike engine because it goes so high. The sound is very different, obviously, to that deep, wailing V10. It's certainly exciting.
It definitely sounds better inside than out, and at lower road speeds it's certainly not as aurally interesting. But aided by the new 8-speed DCT gearbox, which is mounted transversely at the back of the car, there is absolutely no doubting its performance.
Line it up onto this long straight here, just picks up. It is so linear in the way that it revs this car. Would you know that it was turbocharged if you just jumped into it? Which you don't think you would. 0 to 62 in 2.7 seconds, 0 to 124 in 7.1. I do think the graphics on here I'd like them to be just a little bit clearer, perhaps, sort of for track work, because there's an awful lot going on.
One other thing I wasn't entirely sure about design-wise when I first saw the Temerario was the rear of the car. Visually, it seemed too narrow and high, but following one around the track on the cool-down lap after our first session, I began to appreciate the way it exposes the rear tyres, and I could see the designers claimed superbike inspiration with a high-mounted exhaust.
And you think, well, should good design have to be explained to you? Possibly not, but then art history is so interesting because paintings and sculptures come alive much more once you understand the thinking and the background to them, so there we go.
Details aside, it is of course very recognisably from Sant'Agata, and as well as our car's viola and more subtle shades like blue marinus and verde gia, you can obviously have the traditional Leri Lamborghini palette. Inside, well, there's a real sense of familiarity because we've got things like these jet switches that you'll recognise from other Lamborghinis over the past quite a few years now. Obviously, the wonderful start-stop button, which is a lovely piece of theatre, and this gear selector here, which actually looks like it should be sort of a bit of a flight of fancy, but works really well. You know exactly where it is at all times. Steering wheel, a lot of buttons, but to be honest, that's a good thing when you consider the alternative is haptics or having to do it all through a touch screen. Here we've got the switches, the animal one up here, which is in red, so that's kind of the most important, going through your different modes up to Sport and Corsa, which obviously we're using today, and then the EV one here, so you've got Recharge, Hybrid, and then Performance. Everything else, well, these paddles as well, still very familiar for Lamborghini, and I like the fact they're still attached to the steering column. Seats as well, so you've got two options of seats. These are the slightly sportier ones with the scancio thing here for moving backwards and forwards like that. Overall, I think there is also just a little bit more room in here than the Huracan, and certainly being as tall as I am, I found it actually pretty easy to get comfortable, which is not always the case in Italian cars. If you want a more motorsport vibe, then you can also have carbon door panels and fixed polycarbonate side windows, which are part of the Alleggerita or lightweight pack that saves 12.6 kilos and also adds some more aggressive body panels on the exterior for a bit more downforce. If you want to go even further, then you can save another 12.5 kilos with carbon wheels and a titanium exhaust. Right, back to being assaulted by an intercom cable.
Really don't feel the weight in this because it's the best part of 1,700 kilos dry, even with this lightweight pack on it. We've got all the regen going on with the braking, super stable under the brakes, and it just gives some confidence under power in terms of the chassis. Really grab it by the scruff of the neck. It's a tricky circuit, I love it. It's got a very old school feel to it. But you can instantly have this car up on its toes, bounce it over curbs, bodes well for ride quality on the road as well. The dampers, working with the double wishbones and aluminium chassis, are the same amazing Magneride items as on the Revuelto, albeit retuned for the smaller car.
But the really magical stuff is the integration of the electric motors that torque vector to give this almost oxymoronic blend of stability and agility to the handling. It's like finding you can thread a needle first time or nonchalantly catching a fly.
So you've got two real modes for a track. So you've got Corsa, which gives you the sort of stability, I suppose the more sort of predictable, and then Sport, which is a bit more playful. So it's just starting to oversteer more in Sport mode, but it's really progressive. So the interesting thing with this, compared to say the Technica, which was already great, but what Lamborghini feels like it's been doing is it's nibbling away, shortening the gap really in terms of how you access a slide. So previously it always felt like a bit of a leap to get the car sliding, and that was the sort of the barrier to entry, if you like. And gradually they've just been decreasing that gap, so it's just a little step before. Now it's almost smooth, it's sort of almost unnoticeable with this hybrid powertrain and the e-motors in the front giving that torque vectoring. It is amazing now having this sort of torque vectoring. It's amazing being in the slide and just feeling how smooth it is. It's almost like a kind of WRC car with the diff set up really well. You kind of just drive it, very little kind of steering input really. You can kind of drive it on the throttle, trust it to help you.
There is even a drift mode, accessible as a subset of Sport, but although it felt better than most, there was still something a little unnatural about it.
Then if you put it into Corsa, instantly feel it lock down. Bit of understeer through this last corner here, just play with the front end. There is feel there, not necessarily through the steering, it's more through the seat of your pants, just sort of the attitude of the car. Actually, I think I prefer Corsa mode in a way, because although it's not quite as oversteer, you can still oversteer it, but it just feels more natural, more balanced, kind of more faithful in a way. It's very clever. Is it too synthetic with all this sort of help? I think it lacks the outright sort of gritty precision of something like a Porsche GT car around a track, perhaps. But it is fun. It's kind of, it just blurs, smooths, if you like, that phase from grip to slip. It makes it feel definitely more approachable.
Time to go and find the man who I think, after a bit of research, is probably responsible for this new, approachable attitude. Lamborghini's Chief Technical Officer, Rouven Mohr.
The trend that I've seen, I think since you joined Lamborghini again for the second time, because I know you were there for that, is that the cars have felt more approachable, more fun in terms of their driving. There was always the performance there, but it feels like Technica was the one that jumped out to me. It was like, wow, this is quite a change to what's gone before in terms of Huracan, in terms of just that drivability. And I think you might be, at least in part, responsible for some of that.
I mean, at least you're right, for sure. I'm responsible for it, but it's always a team, you know. It's not, obviously. I don't want to overrate me now let me say my role, but it's interesting that you say it because it's fitting to my philosophy, let me say, because from my point of view, if you look today in the automotive market, and for sure the super sports cars are always a little bit, let me say, stepping out of this mass market, what you see a lot in the last decade, you see an explosion of performance. You see that the cars are getting really extremely fast. I mean, also if you look at the pure electric world, also even sometimes a standard sedan is absolutely fast. So the performance is one thing, but my philosophy is always, especially the super sports cars and the sports cars, they have to deliver more than the performance. They have to deliver the thrill and a little bit the excitement. You know, sometimes performance does not mean excitement automatically. And my philosophy is more to stay, especially for a brand like Lamborghini, to stay more on the exciting part. But excited you can be only if you have, let me say, if you have an access to the drivability of the car. And I can tell you, today we are together for the launch of the Temerario that has 920 horsepower. the car is absolutely fast. And if you have not the philosophy to find a way that your customer can approach the limit of the car, means he feels comfortable, he can generate trust, the car behaves consistent, then he cannot have fun. Then he can say, okay, I'm driving in this car, I'm driving the Lambo, but I'm scared, I'm not, and this is not my philosophy. The philosophy is always to have something that is also accessible for the driver.
What's your background? I've seen your Instagram, Dr. Crazy officially. But what's your... I'm intrigued by just, where does this come from? Where does this philosophy, this excitement, what was your background? Did you grow up driving
I mean, to be honest,
particular cars, or?
If you speak about my person, it's a little bit, I would say there are two different things. For sure, on the engineering side, I'm coming, let me say, basically I studied classical mechanical engineering and make my PhD on the numerical mechanics, so I'm coming more from the virtual side. Yeah. If you speak about the automotive background, I was always fascinating in the driving dynamics, so the classical setup things, also my private cars, to experience locked rear differential, this, that. If you ask me as a person, I'm simply a car lover, to be honest. Since I was a child, I'm doing everything with cars. Yeah. Even today, I'm collecting cars, I'm modifying cars, I'm working for a car company. Yeah. But the topic car is never stopping in my life. I read magazines, not because I need to read it, because I do it since I can remember. So therefore, this kind of passion and to think also what could be cool, what could the customer appreciate. This is for sure helping me also in the daily business to take sometimes decisions, because for me it's not difficult. For sure, I'm not saying that I'm always right. This is not the message, but for sure for me it's not so difficult to make a projection what a driver could think, the car feels good, because I asked myself the question, when I think the car is, when I have this kind of, I want to have this car feeling. Yeah. And sometimes are small details. Therefore, if you ask me as a person, for sure it's the combination of these. I have a classical engineering background. I did in my life a lot of, let me say, driving dynamic things, also on the private side, and I love cars. Yeah. Like no other thing let me say, physical thing.
Driving cars is just, it's the best feeling, isn't it?
He really is a proper enthusiast, with a love for everything from 90s hot hatches to stanced Porsches. And just as you can tell from behind the wheel when the likes of Bococci, Preuninger and Schebstadt have been involved in cars, so I think Mohr has made a palpable difference to the dynamics of Lamborghinis over the last few years, with the Temerario being perhaps his biggest statement to date. Obviously we need to try it on the road for the full picture, perhaps even test out the 6 miles of EV range that the 3.8 kilowatt-hour battery allows and the class-leading luggage space. But for now, on track, I can safely say that more people will be capable of getting more performance and enjoyment out of a 907 brake horsepower Lamborghini than I would have ever thought possible a few years ago. And that's remarkable.